Good afternoon, and may I introduce myself as Jason Miles Campbell. I'm the Service Manager at JISC Legal, and my job for the remaining few minutes up into the hour is to round up before your coffee break, and we'll be back after the coffee break. This afternoon it's a very interesting subject, digital copyright, and from my own experience I have learned many lessons. I was a lecturer in law for 10 years, and I look back and I think of all the time that I spent reinventing the wheel. In fact, paraphrasing other people's work, putting together my own materials, when in fact there were materials available that others had written and others had prepared. I think about the time that I wasted that I could have put into providing interactive learning materials, doing the sexier bit of e-learning, rather than simply creating the materials. And what we're trying to get at this afternoon is giving your institution staff the tools that will now enable them to confidently go out and use other people's materials, where appropriate, and to use those online to enable e-learning, e-administration, e-research. That's where we're getting at. Okay, so a very interesting subject, and we don't want to waste time. And it's interesting looking back, 10 years as a lecturer, and I went to training courses on using fire extinguishers, time management, project management, health and safety, but never in 10 years was I given training in copyright. And yet, as a lecturer, I was going to be using other people's stuff quite often. Again, one of the questions you might want to ask in dealing with digital copyright is how much support do you give to your staff? To what extent do you encourage them to look at using other people's stuff to get on doing their job most effectively? Before I round up the subjects that have been covered so far, there's also the question of why comply? Why is this an issue? Aren't we getting on okay? Well, I can say that from JISC Legal's view of the world, we live in sectors that do try and comply with the law and licences to the best of our abilities, for the most part. But we want to make sure that we know what we're doing and that we set a good example. And maybe the first area to start in is what example do we set for our students and for the people that we work with? If colleges and universities can't set the way, then who can? And we're living in an age when many of the students that will come out of our institutions might go into creative industries themselves and rely on the protection of intellectual property for their livelihood. Given that, we want to set the example and get them to understand what copyright is all about, and that means setting the example. We also want to be confident. It happens a fair number of times at JISC Legal that we hear about great innovative work that lecturers and other staff have done at institutions, but then the plug is pulled. And it's pulled because they haven't thought about legal issues. Time's gone on, the effort's been put in, and they can't tell others about it. And that's a real shame. We don't want that to happen. So we want to be confident and we want to be able to disseminate and not have to cover up what we're doing. Trust is another issue. We do quite well with the licenses that we benefit from in further and higher education. We want to maintain a relationship of trust with publishers and other providers, such that we can have decent licenses that make life easy for us. If we are going to be breaching copyright, if we're going to be reckless about it, then that trust relationship won't continue. I think these are pretty much the things, and maybe quality audit as well. Another shame is where an institution has done some wonderful things in e-learning and then invites in quality auditors, or indeed has verifiers imposed upon it, and they come back with a comment saying contains an awful lot of copyright infringing material. We don't really want you to be in that situation. So those are maybe the reasons for compliance. At this point, before I round up the stuff that's gone before, I will remind you that this is a live presentation here and now, and the reason for that is so you can put questions to us here in the studio. So if you haven't done so already, down there is a submit your question button. Think about the sort of issues that can come up at your institution, the sort of things that would release you to do more innovative work at your institution. Press that button and put in a question. And if you haven't sent us a hello yet, well, that's rude. Get on and send us a hello, please. And of course, as an incentive, and I'll remind you just now, this nice flip video camera will be given to one of you sending in your evaluation form at the end. We do look at these, we do pay attention, and we'd like to improve upon our webcasts. So please don't forget to put in the evaluation form at the end. Okay, rounding up then in 3 minutes what copyright is all about so far, digital copyright? Well, first of all, copyright itself is the right to control the copying and dissemination of copyright works. That's pretty much it. And if you're the copyright owner, you can do all the things that copyright restricts. There is no problem. If you're not the copyright owner, you have to get the copyright owner's permission unless a statutory exception applies. That is pretty much copyright. You're either the owner, you get permission, or there's an exception. And for pretty much all of the questions we get at JISC Legal, that's the process we're going through. We're asking, are you the owner of this material? If not, do you have permission, or is there a statutory exception? So we looked first at the educational exceptions, and Jackie took us through the ones that are available to us. We understand there that we have got a fairly wide provision with regards to fair dealing, wide in terms of it's pretty good for individual work, for individual private study and individual non-commercial research. And that allows us, we know, to go to the photocopier and make a copy of work in order to carry out that individual private study or individual non-commercial research. Doesn't take us too far in the digital world, however, and so that's fairly limited in terms of the digital extent. We have the examinations exception, which again, if we're talking about formal assessment, counting for the end mark, then again we've got a quite nice exception there, but only within those limited bounds. We have incidental inclusion. We don't need to worry too much about what's behind the camera when we're shooting video or taking sound recordings. When it comes round to performing, playing or showing recordings, we're allowed to do that. It's an extension a little bit of what we perhaps know and love of sticking DVDs in our DVD players in the classroom. We can maybe take that a little further in the digital world. However, it must be confined to the educational establishment and to teachers and pupils. Media studies students have their own exception, and if it's instruction in filmmaking or film soundtrack making, then there's a particular exception that applies for that. It goes only so far as teaching, however, and so, for example, a promotion of the course or the students through a public performance later on is not going to be covered by such a provision. So the educational exceptions may be useful in certain contexts, but they're limited. We then went on to look at orphaned works. Orphaned works are those where we don't know where the copyright owner is, who they are, and we haven't been able to contact them. Of course, there is also a danger as well, and I'll add in here, that you contact a person who isn't the copyright owner and they give you permission. And it doesn't matter what belief you have that they are the copyright owner and that they could give you permission. If they aren't the copyright owner or the agent of the copyright owner, they can't give you permission. You won't have permission. So it doesn't matter if YouTube gives you permission to do something with a Disney video, then the chances are they don't have the right to do that. There's no get out with regards to orphaned works. The simple question is, do you have the copyright owner's permission? If you can't find the copyright owner, you can't have permission. That said, there may be instances whereby we do want to use something and we can't find the copyright owner, in which case it's a matter of managing risk. That means taking the steps as Lynn outlined, to try and find the copyright owner, due diligence in the search and recording how you've made that search. That's the first part. If you can't find them, then you maybe want a notice saying, if the copyright owner discovers this work, please get in touch. We are willing to pay reasonable royalties if that's appropriate. We may see, of course, some progress in this area. The Gowers Review has looked at orphaned works, and with a bit of luck we might see changes in the law in the near future. Mahesh then went on to look at licenses, and licenses are great. Everything is possible under license. If a license states you can do it, it's fine. You've got the choice to take it or leave it depending on price and the terms. We have a good trust relationship. We have licenses for photocopying, scanning, digital. We have recordings under the ERA, newspapers under the NLA. Admittedly, some restrictions on the digital world, and that has to be looked at. And all the resources that you've signed up to have terms and conditions that may allow you to use these works in the digital arena. And finally, we had David summing up the comprehensive license over the basic license. And that's something that institutions maybe should look at. Are they making best use of the CLA license, whichever one it is they have, that they've got? Do your staff know about these licenses and what they can do?